Everyone, and thank you for joining me. Today, I want to talk to you about the good news of motherhood. And you're probably thinking, what does Bridget mean by that? No worries, this is why this video is here. I'm going to unpack in all of this. These are insights I have gleaned from my own study, my own research, my work with women and mothers, and my own personal, life as a mother, trying to fulfill my own vocation to motherhood. And I want to share this with you today. Now, to do that, I'm going to read some verses from the Bible. I'm going to start with St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, specifically chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. Actually, really want to focus on 4, but I'm going to start reading from 3 just to kind of lead us gently into it. So it reads, Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us in Christ with every spiritual blessing in the heavens. Verse 4, as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. Now, for me, this is mind blowing because what it means is that before God created the whole world, he already knew that he was going to call us. He actually chose us. He created us to be holy. Even before the world existed, you and I had been called to be holy. In fact, we were created to fulfill that purpose of holiness. And when we think about it, holiness is sharing in God's life, in sharing that perfection of love and charity. So it makes sense that he created us so that we can share that life with him. I'll talk about this a little later, but I just wanted to unpack that a little bit. The theme of holiness runs through the Bible, as you probably already know. So, for instance, I'm going to read briefly also from 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 15 and 16, where he wrote, and he said, But as he who called you is holy, be holy yourselves in every aspect of your conduct. For it is written, Be holy, because I am holy. And I know he was making reference to Leviticus as well, because God also said in there to the Israelites, Be holy because I'm holy. Be holy for I am holy. And when Jesus came himself, he told us again, he said, Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And we can read that from Matthew chapter 5, verse 48. So why have I gone through all of this? Again, it's just to impress upon you what I understand, which is you and I are called to holiness. Is the primary reason for our lives. And it doesn't matter whether you're listening to me, you're Christian or you're Catholic, it doesn't matter. You were created for that purpose. Because if you think about the fact that God created us to share in his life, in his divine life, in this divine love, then and if that's what holiness is about at the end of the day, then we understand why he created us, why he created human beings. So what does this have to do with motherhood? Well, if you've read any of my books or you've listened to me, at some point you've probably heard me say something, quote a particular biblical verse quite often. It's probably one of my most favorite biblical verses when it comes to the work I do as a natural fertility therapist and so on. So it is the one from Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. But again, in this case, I'm going to start a little early. I'm going to start from verse 26 because I want to lead us gently into it. I want you to see the big picture there. And it reads, God said, Let us make man in our image and our likeness. Let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the tame animals, all the wild animals, and all the creatures that crawl on the earth. Then it goes on to say, God created man in his image. In his image, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Then my favorite verse, God blessed them and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. It goes on to say, Have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and everything really. And you probably already guessed why this is one of my favorite verses when it comes to motherhood and comes to helping people to get pregnant and all of that, because the call to motherhood was given to us by God himself when he told us to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth and to subdue it. So what does this have to do with the idea of God is calling us to be holy? Because this mandate to be fruitful and multiply was the first and possibly the most important mandate he gave to us when he created us. So we already know that before the foundation of the world, he called us to be holy. But then when he created us, he now gave us a specific mandate. He said, Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Now, if you read the entire chapter chapter 1 of Genesis, you'll find that it wasn't just man he told to be fruitful and multiply. I mean, all the animals reproduce, plants reproduce, and so on and so forth. But there are two significant differences. First of all, he didn't tell them to subdue the earth. But that's not even as important as the fact that before God created man and woman, he said, Let us create man in our image and likeness. In other words, we share in his image and likeness. Our call to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth and to subdue it, transcends all the other calls, all the other things, all the other animals that he had created beforehand, because we are to do it in his image and likeness. And it ties very, very strongly to the theme of him choosing us before the foundation of the world to be holy. If holiness means sharing in God's divine life, it makes sense that he wants to create us in his image and likeness, because how else can we participate in that divinity? How else can we participate in his love? How else can we respond to it, that to the love he has for us? Because we have to wish that, so he's created us in his image and likeness. But as soon as he did that, he gave us a specific mandate, a specific call to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. In other words, being fruitful and multiplying and subduing the earth is, there are key ways in which we can participate in his holiness, that we can become holy. Because otherwise, if he created us to be holy and then he didn't tell us how he wanted us to be holy, he didn't tell us how we're going to, then it's, there's a how do I say now, there's a discordance or discord between those things. I'm trying to think of the word now, but what I'm trying to say, it's there's a dissonance, I think that's what I should say, or something like that, between the fact that he called us to be holy, he created us to be holy, and then he doesn't give us any way of being holy. He doesn't tell us how he wants us to do it. But the fact that he created us in his image and likeness because he wants us to be holy, and almost immediately tells us to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, it means that it is in being fruitful and multiplying, in subduing the earth, that we find our way back to him, that we find that holiness, that we connect with his love and that perfection that he wants us to connect with. So this is, for me, very, very mind-blowing. If you're here and you understand that God is calling you to be holy, that you understand that God is calling to share in his life, in who he is, in his divinity, then you understand very clearly that his call has to be a way for you to achieve that. So when I talk about the good news of motherhood, I'm talking about two things. First and foremost, the fact that God has called you to be fruitful and multiply means that he's the one who he's called you, and God is not, like how Jesus said about the Pharisees, who will tie heavy loads and burdens on people's shoulders and will not lift a finger to lift. God is not like that. If he has called us to be fruitful and multiply, he has called you to motherhood, called me to motherhood, it's because he's given us everything, or he plans to give us everything that we need to be able to fulfill that mandate. So that's the first aspect of the good news of motherhood. First of all, God, who has called you to motherhood, is the one, is ready to meet you there. He's ready to support you there. He's giving you what you need to achieve it. And we know that when God created everything and created Adam and Eve, man and woman, he looked at everything he created and he saw that it was very, very good. Yeah, add emphasis, was very good. So if it was very good, it means that all what we needed to be fruitful and multiply was already given to us. So that's the first good news of motherhood. The first good news, first of all, even though I have given you some kind of background, but the first aspect of that good news is, if you're watching me right now, whether you're trying to get pregnant, whether you're already pregnant and you're looking forward to delivering your baby, whether you already have your children, they're very young or they're older, and whether you're struggling with motherhood because you're struggling to feed your children, to care for them, or because your children are struggling with something, or they're not feeling well, or maybe they don't listen to you anymore, or whatever it is, wherever you are, the first good news of motherhood is God is the one who called you to be fruitful. And because he has called you to be fruitful, he has given you what you need to achieve that. He's meeting you, and he will continue to meet you at different stages of motherhood. That's number one. The second aspect links back to how I began this video, that the good news of motherhood is also that it is through motherhood that you are going to find God, that you can find holiness through motherhood. You are called to find holiness through, not just through motherhood, because he called us to be fruitful and multiply, but also to subdue the earth. So that's another aspect, which another day probably I'm going to look into and expand and talk about. But rest assured that you can find God. He's asking you to find him, to share that life with him, to share his love through motherhood. Now, if you're a Christian listening to this, you probably already have an idea of what I'm talking about. But maybe you fall into this idea or notion of, when I, because God is sacred, my relationship with God is sacred. So I pray, but then I come out into the world and I do my job. I take care of my children, I send them to school, I feed them, I give them paracetamol when they have a headache or not feeling well. Like there's two aspects of me. I go to church on Sunday, I pray, maybe I even fast, I spend that time, that sacred time, I spend it with God. But God doesn't want you to be close and to know Him and to love Him and to serve Him just on Sundays or just when you're spending that time praying. He wants to be part of everything in your life. That motherhood, being fruitful and multiply, is one way, a very essential and important way where you're going to find Him. So maybe you're one of those Christians that do that. We all, to some extent, think that way because, talking to God, it has to be higher. Spending time praying to God has to be more important than me going to the kitchen. And, it's also important for me to feed my children, but in terms of sanctity, which one is higher? And if you're a Christian, you probably understand a Catholic specifically, you probably understand the Catholic traditions of people leaving for retreats or people becoming monks, becoming nuns, where they kind of cut themselves out of the world and they're specifically praying. And, it might seem to us that those vocations are so high, praiseworthy, they are perfect, they are saints, because, all they're doing is talking and praying to God. I want to tell you and remind you that everyone, you see, everyone, that's what St. Paul said to the Ephesians. That's what St. Peter said. That's what Jesus said. He did not specify who has to be perfect or everyone has been called to be holy. Holiness is not for those people in the convent or the monastery, people who are going to the top of the mountain to pray and fast, or people, it doesn't matter what branch of Christianity you belong to. There's always that sense that you have to separate yourself from day-to-day lives and whatever in order to be able to find God and be holy. God is asking you to find Him, yes, in your heart, when you pray, but also in everything that you do. So, for instance, where you find somebody like a nun who's staying all night before the Blessed Sacrament or praying every night, just communicating with God. A woman who is staying up because her child is sick is also finding God there. Because your child is sick, you're checking temperature, making sure they're okay, going back and forth. You haven't slept for 3, 4, 5 days. That vigil that you are doing is you finding God there. Jesus said, when I was hungry, you gave me to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. When I was sick, you visited me. When you carry out these works of mercy, even for your own children and even for people outside of your family, you are doing it to Jesus. That is Jesus there. When your child is hot and his body temperature is really high, and you're trying to cool him down and he's crying and you are there holding his hand or whatever, you are doing that to Jesus. This is how we find God. This is how we find holiness within motherhood. And when I think about it, and I know I'm being partial here because I'm a mom, I believe that as a mom, we have so abundant opportunities to find God because we're on call 24/7. 7 days of the week, 365 days of the year. I don't care which kind of mother you are. Constantly, there is always, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, whether you work from home or you work outside of the home, we think about our children almost all the time. As we're making decisions, we're thinking about them. As we're moving around, we're thinking about them. Imagine you're there and you get a call from your children's school. What do you start to think? Oh, is there a problem? Is everything fine? This is it. We have ample opportunities for holiness. We are so lucky because we will do motherhood anyway, but we can either do it on a natural level, we're just taking care of our children, or we can raise it up, we can elevate it to a level of sanctity where we can find God there, even as we do that. So when you're taking care of your child, when you're feeding your child, when you're taking them to school, when you're helping them their homework, when you're scolding them, when you're teaching them about God, when you're teaching them how to pray, all of this, you tell God and you find God in it. And I'm doing this for God. And this elevates your motherhood to another level. It transcends the natural. It goes to the supernatural. You find God there. You find holiness there. This, my sisters, is the good news of motherhood. First, that God has called you to become a mother. And because He has called you to be a mother, it doesn't matter what stage of motherhood you are in. He is there because He's the one who has called you. That desire to become a mother, if you're somebody who is trying to get pregnant right now, that desire to become a mother is not just, I always say this, it's not just something you thought about. It's not a selfish thing. It's not something I'm doing because society expects me to do. It's God who has put it in your heart. And God who has put it in your heart is not a mean God. It's not a wicked God. It's not saying, I'm going to give her the desire to become a mom, but I'm going to step back and let her do it by herself. No. whether you have that child already, whether you are trying to raise them, whether they're already old and they've started work, they have their own families, God is with you, fulfilling that vocation. And God is also inviting you to find Him in that vocation as you move forward every single day. Every single day. So, and I'm going to say something again to people who are trying to get pregnant right now, because I'm talking about the goodness of motherhood. Maybe you're thinking, I'm not a mother yet. I want to become a mom. I'm trying so hard. Maybe I'm not married. Maybe I'm married and, conception is not happening. This is part of your journey to this motherhood journey, whether you already have that child or you are preparing to have that child or you are trying to have that child, you're already fulfilling that vocation. It's already a means for you to find God there. To find God there. And one of these days, I'm going to be doing videos on women in the Bible, how God will come and, a woman who's been trying to get pregnant and God will intercede or intervene at a specific time. Is it that God did not know that that woman was struggling? He knew. But the journey He wants that woman to face is different from another woman's journey. We are all different. We all are called to holiness through motherhood, but our particular journeys are different. It's about you finding God. God, how do you want me to see you now in this my journey as a mother? What do I need to do? How do I remember to bring this and uphold it and just believe that because you've called me to it, you are with me at every painful step of the journey? Maybe you are here and you've lost a pregnancy before and you're thinking, why is God that has called me to be fruitful and multiply allowing me to lose my baby? Believe me, I know. I've said that to myself. I've said that to him so many times because I did also lose a pregnancy again. I've talked about this before and maybe in the future I'll talk about it again. I know how difficult it is, but you have to remember that regardless of what is going on now, the specific stage of motherhood that you are, you've been called to become a mom. And God is with you at each step of the way. And every step of every step or stage of motherhood that you are in, He's working with you towards achieving something. But most importantly, just always remember that the goodness of motherhood, first of all, He who has called you to it, He would help you through it. And secondly, as He's helping you through it, as you are walking that journey, remember that it's a means for holiness. It means for you to understand and live more united to God who created you and who chose you before the foundation of the world to be holy and blameless in His sight. So, my sisters, this is what I understand from the goodness of motherhood. I hope it's helped you. In my next video, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about if God has called me to be fruitful and multiply, why is it that it's so difficult for me to have a baby? Or why is it that motherhood is so difficult for me? Or why is it that my children are not listening or they're becoming whatever? Insert any motherhood problem there, because motherhood is not a walk in the park. So why is this the case? In my next video, I'm going to be talking about that. So please subscribe if you haven't subscribed already so that you don't miss when that video drops. Also, let me know in the comments, this motherhood journey, how are you finding God in it? What are your thoughts about finding God in it? What are your thoughts about the good news of motherhood? Share them with me. And if you have any questions specifically, there will be a link under this video somewhere where you can click to a form and ask me questions. Because what I want to be doing also is when I have talked about some of these things, I want to answer questions that you have as well. Let me know what questions you have. It can range from the theological aspects of motherhood, just like we've talked about today. It could also be anything to do with the practical realities of motherhood. You already have a child, this is what you're struggling with, or this kind of challenges you're having, or you just want my take on something. Or maybe you're trying to get pregnant and you're thinking, what do I do about my menstrual cycle? My menstrual cycle is like this or like that. So any motherhood question you have, put it there. I will try my very best to answer it to the best of my ability, and I hope it will help you or help other women out there. So take care, guys, and I will see you soon by God's grace. Bye and God bless.